Madam Clerk, would you next please read docket 0888 into the record?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Docket 0888. Councilor Janey offered the following order for hearing concerning residents in neighborhoods in Boston most affected by student death post-pandemic.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The chair now recognizes the Council President. Councilor Janey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Before moving on, I would like to add Councilor Mejia as an original co-sponsor.
He is duly added. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very proud to sponsor this hearing order examining student debt in Massachusetts. The U.S. Department of Education reports that in Massachusetts, 871,600 borrowers owe roughly $28.7 billion collectively in federal student loan debt, which is nearly $33,000 on average per borrower. And that does not include private loans. And that borrowers in low-income neighborhoods experience even higher rates of delinquency and defaults, and that they often owe more money and have higher interest. Examining college debt is more than just looking to erase the numbers. It's taking steps to alleviate and disrupt the harmful cycle of intergenerational poverty in our communities, highlighted in the Black and Brown agenda. Examining student debt is an important piece in addressing the enormous wealth gap and the existing inequities as we move towards an equitable economic recovery. By working with all of you on the council, with our federal partners in government, like Senators Warren and Markey and our Congresswoman Presley, our former colleague, we can explore strategies for eliminating debt, and we can uplift low-income workers and families, communities of color, seniors, and help move folks out of poverty and toward generational wealth. I want to take a quick moment to thank the Zero Debt Massachusetts Coalition for their tireless advocacy and support on this issue, and I look forward to continuing to work with them and many others. I hope folks will sign on. I know that this is a huge issue, particularly as we're talking about consumer affairs and the involvement of our AG and what is happening in terms of people defaulting on these loans and predatory lenders in this space as well. So looking forward to a great conversation in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The chair now recognizes the at-large counsel from Dorchester. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vice President. And thank you, Madam President, for working on this issue. This issue is deeply personal for me. Growing up, I never expected to go to college. And so when I finally finished and became the first in my family to graduate college, it really felt like an accomplishment. But something that you're never really prepared for is the student debt that follows us long after that achievement. What is even more concerning are the hurdles that our students of color and students with college degrees have to jump through just to make ends meet. Those in low-income communities often struggle to pay their student debt, which results in defaulting on loans, paying extra for interest, and losing benefits. We need to seriously commit to the work of removing systemic barriers to economic security during and beyond this pandemic. And like we've said before, COVID didn't create these systemic inequalities. They just exposed them and made them worse. I look forward to working with Councilor Janey to find solutions to take the burden off of our hardworking people. And I also want to give a shout out to Zero Debt Massachusetts for their long run in this advocacy space and making sure that we address this issue. Looking forward to not just having a conversation for the fact of having a conversation of the conversation in a public hearing, but really to come to some resolution and figuring out how we can move this work forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. The chair now recognizes the at-large councilor from South Boston, Councilor Flaherty. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and obviously thanks to the maker. Please add my name. And as mentioned in her hearing order, there are cities that have programs that can help students with student loan debt. In collaboration with Spark Boston, the city is offering counseling sessions with the American Student Assistance about financial wellness and student loans, et cetera. and that pertains to City of Boston employees. So obviously, that's a good program. We should continue to grow these types of programs and make them widely available and accessible in meaningful ways to our residents that are in greatest amount of need. So this is very important. It's also very timely. So again, please add my name and look forward to an expedited hearing with the sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please add the at-large counselor from South Boston as a co-sponsor. The chair now recognizes the district counselor from Hyde Park. Councilor Arroyo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank the makers for their leadership on this in Zero Debt Massachusetts. I actually have student loan debt, excessive student loan debt, if you ask me. I graduated from a state school, Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, debt-free. I made that decision specifically in part because I knew that I would get in-state tuition. I'd be able to handle that in a different way. When I made the decision to go to law school, I knew I wanted to be a public defender, and I also knew that my family did not have the generational wealth or the ability to carry my debt, and so I had to take out student loans to do that, and I made a determination to do that. And I remember at the time hearing from multiple people who wanted me to be clear on how much that debt would impact my life. And the reality is I made a decision to go to law school, and many of our folks in our communities do, and almost every person of color who I went to law school with did make this decision on the basis that they weren't going to allow dreams that they had or the contributions that they wanted to make to society be determined by whether or not they had the money to do that or not, or their family had generational wealth to do that or not. And so my student debt at the time of graduation was about $200,000. And because I made the determination to be a public defender, it gained in 5 years $100,000, give or take, in interest. And so my student debts are somewhere around $300,000 simply for the belief in myself and my abilities. And frankly, I did well in law school. I was able to do well as a public defender. And the reality is that people who came with generational wealth, of which we have a long racial history of why generational wealth does not exist in communities of color, are hamstrung by it. It hamstrung my, so in order to be a public defender, I needed to have a car. And I'll never forget walking in with a credit score in the upper 700s, but needing co-signing because my student loan debts were so high, even though I had a job already on the table and it was going to take care of that. And I needed a co-signer. One of my parents had to co-sign with a 770 credit score for a vehicle. And so when we talk about the impacts that these have on families when it comes to the ability to have children and think about what that looks like with your student loan debt, when it comes to the idea of buying or purchasing a home or getting involved in a rental program or getting involved in anything that requires the ability to use your credit, whether or not you have good credit scores or not, and I do, the debt itself is a barrier. And when we talk about generations and generations and generations of racism, frankly, and structural institutional racism that has not allowed families to create the opportunities required, we can't create financial barriers to education, and we can't hamstring our kids who do all of the things we ask them to do, to go to college, to go to law school, to go to doctorate, to go get a doctorate, to be doctors, and then tell them when they finish that they have to pay the price of generations and generations of racial inequity that then keeps their inability to create cycles of wealth for their own families after they've done everything they have to do. And so I am grateful for this. I think this is an issue that affects far more people than folks are even aware of. I think there's a shame attached to student debt, and people don't talk so often about their student debts because debt is a dirty word in our country. And the reality is that when we do that, we exclude them to the shadows. And this is a great conversation to have because it's a pertinent issue that touches almost every aspect of somebody's life, including, I'll be frank, in my own life, my decisions on when and how I would get married, when and how I would explore the expansion of my family, when and how I would explore the ability to buy a home. And so, this touches every level of somebody's life, and I'm grateful that we are having this conversation. So thank you so much to the makers. Thank you, President Janey, for something that I think touches all of our lives.
You signing on?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Madam Clerk, please add Councilor Arroyo as a co-sponsor. The chair now recognizes the district councilor from East Boston, Councilor Edwards. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Vice President, excuse me. I will be succinct. The fact is, I also have debt. I also was one of the first in my family to go to law school, and it is a detractor from pursuing education. And that the two shouldn't be in the same conversation. How much debt can you take on should not at all hinder or even impact how much education you'd like to pursue. That being said, I do recall we had talked about, and there was an announcement earlier in the administration about access to or pipelining into some free community colleges. I recall, and I'm only bringing this up to the chair, to the sponsor, and to the co-sponsors as part of this conversation, for us to pick up that conversation as to what happened, or if that's still happening with access to community college. I think that is one way to eliminate student debt, is how we marry and pipeline our school kids into community college so that they're graduating with more college credits, so that when they go to college, they are steps, sometimes a year ahead, and have to borrow less and have to spend less time in college. So I'd like to bring that up. I also wanted to make sure we were also talking about how we move with the UMass Boston. So there's higher education institutions as well that we should be talking about, and also pipelines that are debt free that we should be talking about. And I hope that could be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. Madam Clerk, please add Councillor Edwards as a co-sponsor.
Yes.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the District Councillor Mattapan. Councillor Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and thank you to the leadership of our president with respect to this critical issue, not only for residents in my district, but all across the city. I just will say two things. One, everything Councilor Arroyo said, literally everything he said, I sign on to. He summed it up perfectly in the many facets of this issue with respect to not only myself personally, but also particularly communities of color and residents of color. One layer I would love to add to the conversation, and this is to the maker, is many of our students are graduating from our high schools, our BPS high schools, and going to community colleges or going to universities and taking on debt for remedial classes. So classes or things they should have learned while in our system. This continues to be a part of conversations I'm having in the education space that sometimes connect to the student debt piece. So if you should have, for example, I don't know, gotten calculus or geometry or something like that, something you need to pursue a degree at a university level, you're now going to college to pay for that. And many of our students drop out having not completed those remedial classes. They leave the universities or the colleges, and they leave with debt. And so this is a major topic of discussion that I think happens in silos, so would love for it to be included here. And thank you again, Madam President, for your leadership on this issue. Thank you to the advocates, and please add my name.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please add Councillor Campbell as a co-sponsor. Seeing no further discussion, would any other councillors wish to add their name? Madam Clerk, please add the District Council from South Boston. Madam Clerk, please add the District Council from Beacon Hill. Madam Clerk, please add the at-large councillor from Dorchester. Madam Clerk, please add the at-large councillor from Roslindale. Madam Clerk, please add the District Councillor from Alston Brighton. And Madam Clerk, please add the chair. Docket 0888 shall be referred to the Committee on Small Business and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.